I know this seems premature, but are you likely to do the live stream next year?
If they're happy with doing it the way I'm doing it this time, yeah, then that's fine.
Well, surely this has worked better than last year. It did. Yeah, that's what I would have thought. Yeah. I mean, it just looks like you've got it all together now.
No, I haven't really.
I'm sure there was gaff tape and sticky tape all over the place last time.
Yeah, there were.
Holding it together.
It's more of a case trying to do Tim's job at the same time as I was trying to do this. And that was
you'd only just got that, if I remember.
No, I've had it for a little while. Yeah. But I didn't have the problems that I had this year.
Did you actually get this working?
Yes, it's going.
Oh, great.
Yep.
It looks like it's actually lighting up the way it's meant to as well. Okay, I'm only asking because I might make up a special table to go from there to here instead of the conglomerate of tables.
Oh.
I think that would be a better sound. So I'll just stop that.
So you don't even have to control the slides now.
Correct. I'm going to get you making some cards or do something else.
And I think all I'll be doing is just starting the live stream and then letting it go. Yeah.
I just taught her something. What'd you teach her? How to send the homework. Oh.
How much does that sound desk cost, Steve?
When I bought it, I think it was about 2,800 maybe, but they've gone up to $4 grand.
Oh, really? Yeah. Usually that they drop down in price or something.
And I've got a 32-channel stage box.
Yeah.
And that was like about a bit over 2,000. But then recently I had to buy for 2,500. The 24 channel, which is less, as the backup.
I know you're not a Behringer person, but I bought a digital stage box for the church, but it hasn't got stuff. It's only got something like eight inputs and eight outputs.
So you can cascade those things.
Yeah. But that was $1,000.
Yeah, they're not cheap, are they?
No.
But I mean, I would go with Behringer. I just haven't.
Yeah.
At the time, there was something on this list I wanted. I can't remember what it was. I had a way of thinking about it that I didn't think the Behringer had. And I'm pretty sure this was a better price than the Behringer.
Okay.
For some reason. So I'll opt for that.
I'll show you I can't.
I mean, from what I hear, the Behringer are not going too badly and people are quite happy with them.
Well, the one at church has done really well. I'm pretty happy. This is the thing that has the money and I was using it. That will replace this thing here.
Yeah.
It's a lot bigger, but it's also got a lot more capability as well.
Yeah.
You note the price. It looks the price looks good.
Yeah.
But when you change it over to
Australian dollars. Yeah, I had a feeling it's going to be that way. I mean, Blackmagic have done a good job. They make their software free.
Yeah, they do.
And they get people kind of addicted.
Yep.
And then they probably make it work really well with the Black Magic gear. So people buy the Black Magic gear.
So I use their Da Vinci film editor stuff.
Yeah.
It's good.
You know, a lot of people use it, and it's, I mean, they haven't cut it down. It works really well.
You started? Yes. Yes.
It is being live streamed.
Yeah.
And use the mic as well.
So, are you going to use the? No. She's going to do that.
You can take it off if you want to. Violet.
Where's she going to go to?
I'm sorry. Okay, I'm sorry, ladies, but anyway, they put me, or I have to introduce Deborah. But anyway, it's a privilege for me to introduce you and to talk especially about this topic, stress. And actually, I need all what she said this morning, and it was so good. But we will continue. But before we continue, I just want to give you a few points about Deborah. Deborah married to Luke, and she have 4 children, 3 married, and they have 6 grandchildren. Beautiful. And Deborah, she's a GP, she's a general practitioner, and just helping in the church and helping in the community. She liked to help the church and the community with her husband. And she is work and meeting, she liked to work and meeting physical, emotional, the spiritual need of the people there in Balmain, because she worked in Balmain. So Deborah loved seeing women, all ages, better equipped to serve in their church and serve their God. And also Deborah loved running, loved gardening, loved reading, eating out, which is I love. So please, just put your hand together to welcome Deborah.
Thank you, ladies, and well done for still being awake at this time of the day. I just had a quick little duck over to Bald Hill Lookout to visit my son and granddaughter and daughter-in-law who live at Bulli. So that was very lovely. She's extremely cute. Cleo is her name. She's 2. And she goes running to Grandma. Pretty cool. So hi. So thank you, Violet, for welcoming me. I've just been asked to speak this afternoon on this topic of managing stress and anxiety, because as I'm going to say, stress is a normal part of how we've been wired, but I'm hoping that we can go away with some tools to be able to manage our stress better and to feel like we have some sense of control over it. So just as she said, I'm a Presbyterian minister's wife in Balmain, in the inner west of Sydney. I can see the Harbour Bridge from my backyard. But this has been a busy time in pastoral ministry of looking after our churches through live stream and COVID and all of that stuff. So that's a busy job. And then, as she said, I've got 4 adult children, 3 of them married, and I'm grandmother to 6 grandchildren under 6. So it is pretty busy. And I still have a couple of frail elderly parents. So I do, and a couple in the country, a couple nearby. So I do a fair bit of juggling and worrying about family members in the middle of the night, as I'm sure you all do. So I feel like I'm pretty qualified to speak about stress and anxiety from a personal point of view. But I am, as Violet said, also a GP, a general practitioner in Balmain. And definitely over this last COVID season, I have cared for a lot of people with stress and anxiety and fear. So from a professional point of view, managing stress and anxiety is something that I do every day. So I think, as I said, the main message I want you to go away with is that stress and anxiety are something that many people experience. You're not alone. But most importantly, stress and anxiety can be managed. So our responses to stress and anxiety depend very much on our thinking and on our worldview. When you're in the midst of a stressful situation or dealing with anxiety, the world feels out of control and scary, doesn't it? But as Christians, we have a huge advantage because we know the God who is in control of all things. We know that the world might appear scary, but it is never out of the control of our loving God. So knowing that truth and holding on to it in the midst of difficult times is more effective than most medications. So changing our thinking and remembering our worldview is a very important tool for managing stress and anxiety. Now, in your booklet, I think on page 16 and 17 of you found, I've actually got an outline, and I'm going to have a couple of slides there for you to watch. So you can feel free to take notes and write some things down. Because the other thing that's also very useful for us to understand is actually what is happening to us physically and mentally when we experience stress and anxiety. And so that's what I'm going to unpack for you now. I'm one of those GPs that draws lots of pictures and sends people away with lots of handouts. So that's how I like to work. So let's have a look. Let's have a talk first about what is stress. So stress is a normal biological reaction to a potentially dangerous situation. It's a normal biological reaction to a potentially dangerous situation. When we perceive a threat or a major challenge, our body triggers its fight and flight response. It floods our bodies with chemicals like adrenaline and cortisol in order to either fight the stressor or run away from it. So what causes this stress reaction to occur in our bodies and our minds? Well, in the past, it might have been because we needed to run away from a dinosaur or fight a fire. But we still have plenty of things in our world today that trigger this stress reaction. There are things in the natural environment that might trigger it, such as bright lights, too much heat, confined spaces, noise, traffic, and sickness. All of those things in the physical world can trigger that stress reaction. And we're probably more familiar with the sort of stress that comes from social situations or life events. What sort of social situations or life events might cause us to feel stressed? Estrangement. Yeah, okay, so if there's broken relationships of any sort, definitely. Anything else? Sorry? Illness of a loved one, yes, that's right. Can't hear what that was, sorry. Public speaking. Yes, that's kind of an outside one and an inside one, isn't it? Definitely that can be it. I was saying this morning that some people find standing up and speaking in front of people absolutely terrifying, but there's other people who actually find speaking to someone one-on-one just as terrifying. So I specialise in one-on-one in my work, so this is a little bit out of my comfort zone. But yeah, lots of things. So the classic things that they say that are very stressful are moving house, having a new baby, the death of a relative, broken relationships, and then there's catastrophes, of which we're very familiar, aren't we? Like floods, bushfires, COVID. So all of those things, of course, trigger rightfully a stressful reaction in us. And we can also have stress reactions to more emotional subjects, I guess, things like conflict or bullying, or work pressures, or just busyness. There's some internal triggers that make us feel, there's lots of internal things that make us feel that stress reaction. And they're not imagined things, they are real physical changes that your body recognises as a threat to your well-being. Some of the physical things that can cause it in our own bodies are sleep deprivation. If you deprive someone of sleep for long enough, that's a form of torture, as some of you may know, only too well, and that can make our bodies stressed. Hormonal change. Some of us are coming or going through menopause. I can't see any pregnant women here. Adolescence. Hormonal change is a huge stress to our bodies. Affects people in different ways, but it definitely can trigger stress reactions. And things like mental illness, of course. So they can have a greater impact on us, particularly when they're coupled with certain type of personality traits, such as perfectionism, or workaholism, or pessimism. Those people who are over-analytical or self-critical. Those types of thought patterns, which we'll talk about a bit later on, they can make stressors even more stressful, the way that we interpret things. There's a bit of a message there, isn't there? So there's a lot of things out there in the world and a lot of things within us that our body perceives as being dangerous and might mount that fight or flight reaction. So what happens when we're stressed? This is one of my pictures. So actually when we're stressed, when we sense danger, the first thing that happens in our hypothalamus, which is at the base of our brain in behind our nose, we start sending out nerve and hormone signals to our heart, also to our adrenal glands. Our adrenal glands are on top of our kidneys and they release adrenaline and cortisol. They're the stress hormones. And their job is to prepare our bodies for whatever the danger is and whether the need is to run from a dinosaur or fight a fire. They're our stress preparatory hormones. And so when our hypothalamus tells our adrenal glands to release adrenaline, what sort of things do we feel, first of all? What's the first physical things we feel? Heart. Exactly, that's the first thing that happens. Our heart starts to beat faster. What else happens? It just happened to me when I drove down this morning. Someone almost cut me off in the traffic and they didn't hit me, but my heart rate went up. I flushed. You remember feeling that? Find my spot. I start breathing. How do you breathe when you're stressed? Rapidly, because you're ready to run from the dinosaur. You might sweat. There's some interesting things that happen in the rest of our body. Our metabolism changes. So insulin is suppressed because we're not going to be digesting food now. We're sending energy straight away to the muscles so we can run and to our heart. And so what happens in our guts when we're stressed? You guys mustn't be very stressed off. They churn, don't they? They churn. And we might have loose bowels, mightn't we? They hurry everything through. We've got to get all that stuff out of the way because we've got to go running and chase away from the dinosaur. So there's a real physical thing that happens. Our metabolism changes. And some of the functions in our body that are not needed in the stress response are suppressed, like immunity. Who would have thought? Our immune systems do not work very well when we are stressed. Growth. People who are under physical sustained stress can stop growing, or young children can stop growing. Reproduction. People have very, very commonly, women stop having their periods, don't they, when they're under stress? Because we don't need those things to happen when we're about to run away from the dinosaur. So it all sounds very scary, and it's meant to, because the stress reaction is meant to be for dealing with emergencies and disasters. But stress is not always bad, and so we don't need to be afraid of stress, because it can be a really good thing. It's our designed way of dealing with emergencies. And it helps us to perform well in exams. It helps us excel in sport. That's why the coach revs the team up at the beginning, gets them all hyped so they can go out and perform really well. It can help us deal with with difficulties in medical emergencies. I was saying this morning when I was about 8 months pregnant with my second child, I lost control of a loaded shopping trolley and it fell on top of my 2-year-old, and I, 8 months pregnant, pulled the whole trolley off my 2-year-old daughter with some sort of superhuman strength. That was adrenaline. You've probably heard of people continuing to play a game of sport with a broken arm or broken ribs. Or carry people out of danger in a fire with something like that. That's adrenaline that does that. Very useful, crucial to human survival in lots of situations. It helps mothers through labour. It's very key in labour. And helps with public speaking. It's quite good to be just a little bit stressed when you're speaking. So it's the body's perfect response to a short-term emergency. But it was never meant to be used for the long term. So if adrenaline and cortisol levels stay raised for too long, rather than helping us, they start to cause harm. So this graph is, you may have seen it before, I don't know. So on the downside, on the left, is performance, and on the bottom is stress. So you can see that as your stress increases, your performance actually improves. But if you keep on with the stress, you can see what happens. Your performance starts to go down. So the increased efficiency and mental acuity, the mental alertness that adrenaline can give us, over time that wanes, and we actually end up with reduced efficiency. It's like that running around like a headless chook kind of thing. Don't know what you're doing. Initially you're really focused, but after a while it just all be overwhelming. And if the situation persists for days or weeks or months, we start to see really damaging physical effects like weight gain, high blood pressure, sleep problems, low energy, diabetes, stomach ulcers, headaches, this was fascinating to people this morning, osteoporosis. When you're under a lot of stress, the parathyroid hormone leaches calcium out of, I can't tell you exactly the biochemistry, leaches calcium out of your bones to be used in nerve messages and muscle. And so yes, osteoporosis happens during pregnancy as well, sad to say. The baby leaches all the calcium out of your bones. It's a dreadful thing, pregnancy, really. So osteoporosis, memory problems, of course, and weakened immune system. So I can't tell you how many times I've seen someone under enormous stress, whether it's, with their family or whatever's gone on, and then sure enough, they get a cancer diagnosis or they get a very overwhelming infection. Our immune systems can be suppressed when we're under constant stress. And that's hard to quantify, but it's very well accepted. And I see all these things every day, these results of constant stress, unrelenting stress. And that initial increased mental acuity, that really sharp, focused mind that you get when you're first stressed, eventually that turns into anxiety. Because anxiety is like constant mental alertness, isn't it, for those of you who've been anxious? All of the things that might have been useful in the short-term emergency are unable to be turned off, and they become overwhelming. So things like overthinking, racing thoughts, sleep disturbance, and then all those physical symptoms that we mentioned, like racing heart, raised blood pressure, those gut-churning symptoms, bowel disturbances. That constant sense of hyper-alertness typical of anxiety, it's really unpleasant, isn't it? And exhausting. And if these things persist for long enough and are unable to be shut down, they eventually lead in some people to depression. Because depression is actually adrenaline and serotonin burnout. And you get low mood, slow mental functioning, low energy levels. And I think this kind of progress is what some of us have seen during COVID. Initially, the prospect of the virus was scary, but we all had that sense of pulling together, didn't we? We were helping our communities, we were problem solving. We responded to the stress by finding solutions and adapting. We all learned how to live stream. We figured out how to Zoom. We figured out how to do, care packages for our people in our church. It was kind of a bit invigorating, wasn't it, in some ways? But there came a time when the stress was too prolonged and the problem solving became overthinking and obsessionism and sleep disturbance. And that's when it became anxiety for a lot of people. And I've seen so much of that, even amongst very young children. And those constant, we were talking before, those constant messages every day in the press, number of deaths, it's all so dreadful, doom, gloom. And that made everyone anxious, didn't it? And further down the track, for many people, coping with the unrelenting stress of working from home, loss of social supports, financial worries, homeschooling children. Who did that? Jeez, that was horrible. And that eventually led, in some people, to depression, which is adrenal fatigue, actually. That's how we understand depression. So that's what happens. But they're the downside of chronic stress on that slide, I think. But the good news is we can manage our stress. It was given to us, it's part of God's good design, we just need to keep it in its box. So how do we do it? Well, I think one of the big things that we need to all do individually is to understand what stresses us. And it's going to be different for all of you. Some people find, as I said, standing up here, public speaking, very stressful. Some people find one-on-one in a confronting sort of situation more stressful. You might find cooking a meal for a whole lot of people just absolutely does your head in. You might be one of those chilled out people who can, that's fantastic, but we don't want to go and give a talk somewhere or work in an office or something. We've all got different things that stress us. And I reckon a good thing to do is to go away, get a little diary or write it in your phone or something, and try and be observing over the next couple of weeks, when do you actually feel stressed? Like, when do you start to feel like, my heart's beating, I'm breathing a bit shallowly, I'm feeling a bit churny in the guts, I've been to the toilet a few times today, and what's happening when that happens? Some people are incredibly in tune to their bodies, but I've seen so many patients that I'm not anxious, I'm not stressed, and they clearly are, but they just don't recognise it until they get some really bad physical diagnosis, but they don't recognise that they've internalised their stress. So it's a good idea to try and write down what's causing your stress and think about it. You might need to talk to someone, probably not your partner, that might not be the best, but yeah, other people that you trust, or sometimes a counsellor, as to try and understand what's causing you stress. And then once you've done that, then let's see if we can change the balance a bit. Because short-term stress, in its place, it's good, but overwhelming stress for long periods of time, that's bad, okay? So firstly, can we minimise stressors? Can we get rid of some of the stress in our life? Can we change jobs or quit our job? Can we work less hours? Can we rethink all the things that we've volunteered for? Can we drop out of some of those committees? Can we reduce some of the social activities that we have on the weekend that we're trying to cram into our lives as though it's sort of a mark of some sort of everybody's approval that we're all really, really busy? Or can we change some of the activities that our children go to or our husband goes to, that we have to drop them off and pick them up and do their washing after? You probably can't get rid of your children, but can you get some help with your children or your parents, elderly parents, some shared babysitting, or do you need more daycare or some respite care or my aged care, all those sorts of things. So can you reduce some of the stressors in your life? Because sometimes you can, often you can. But sometimes you can't. Sometimes you're stuck with it. You know, you've got a bad medical diagnosis, your husband's sick, your children's stressed out, your grandchildren are here all the time. You know, you just got to get on with it, haven't you? So what do you do then? Well, you need to make sure you've got some recovery time, because you can have your adrenaline levels and be stressed as long as you can come down again for a little while before you have to go back up again, and then you can come down a little bit for a while. It sounds crazy, but it's very real. We know that if we reduce our adrenaline levels, otherwise I see people whose adrenaline levels and stress levels are here, and it just takes one little thing and they're just over the top. Whereas if we're down, we're coming down and we're relaxing. So what do? We need time for our adrenaline and cortisol levels to drop and for us to get more perspective in our thinking. And it's so important. If you're someone who's in the middle of an unrelenting, stressful time of your life, and there's seasons, aren't they? There are seasons when it's very, very difficult. 2 years ago, my oldest daughter lived with us with her 2 twins. That's fun. Fun. My mother-in-law was living with us with dementia. I had a father who was dying in the country. We were running a church through COVID. I was running a general practice through COVID. I was going crazy. But I couldn't run away from most of it, so I needed to factor in downtime. So what are the things we need to do? And it says that at the bottom of page 16. The most important thing is more time with God. And yet, the busier we are, often the less time we spend with God, isn't it? It's often the thing that we forget about first. But it's actually, it's our what's the word? Our kryptonite as Christians. That's the thing we've got. We've got to use it, ladies. We know the one who is in charge of this world. We've got to keep plugging into him. This world does not recognise God anymore or acknowledge God very much. And there's so many anti-Christian and anti-God messages out there. We need to make sure we're going back to the source all the time, regularly, so we can adjust our thinking and know our perspective and get it right. We need to keep our eyes on Jesus, as Joan said this morning. And so that's the first thing we have to do. We need to make sure, by hook or by crook, we forget about watching anything on television, forget about cleaning the toilet, read the Bible and pray. Listen to it on your phone when you're walking somewhere, but do it. The second thing that I think is right up there, not quite as high up as with God, but is exercise. Violet was saying that I do a lot of exercise, and it's been very important for me as my mental downtime. It's obviously good for you. It does balance the potential harmful effects of cortisol. So there's different hormones that are released when we exercise, which are more our feel-good hormones. So that gives us a sense of well-being, but it also gives you time to think, gets you time to put things in perspective, gives you time to pray. So exercise is really important, and it might just be sitting on a chair doing some exercises, but it might be walking or riding a bike or whatever you want to do. It might be just gardening or something, but exercise that you enjoy. And I always think we need to plan to exercise, and we have to plan doable exercise. It's no use me saying, all of you have got to go out and run a marathon next week. You need to plan to do something you can achieve. And I also think it's really important to have a partner, have someone that you're accountable to. When I first started running, I was in my 40s actually, because I was kind of a geeky kid with thick glasses who did music and studied all the time. I wasn't sporty at all. But I had a really good friend, another mum, who taught me to run, basically. And it was really jog between telegraph poles, then walk, 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 and then jog, and then walk, 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 and then jog. And we've done almost 20 city surfs together. I've done several half marathons. And now I don't run all the time, but, my Pilates and weights and stuff is very, very important to me. But I used to get out of bed and go running because I knew she was standing at the corner waiting for me. So accountability and having a partner is very important. But there is a lot of things you can do. There's lots of apps that you can do if you're a motivated type. There's gyms you can join. So plan to do it and do it because it's important. It keeps you strong. It keeps you able to play with your grandkids and keep going. Eat well. That also sounds like basic and self-explanatory. But do you remember I said that stress changes our metabolism? Stress actually makes us crave simple sugars because they deliver fast, short-term bursts of energy. Has anybody experienced that? Stress, stress, stress. Sugar, 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 sugar. Yes, of course, we know that. But what's the downside to snacking on short-term sugars? Do you know? Low GI, so what does that mean? What happens? Exactly, that's right. The metabolism of simple carbohydrates is very fast. If you've ever done one of those glucose tolerance tests where you had to fast and have a drink and test your blood, you know that your sugar level comes back down to its baseline at 2 hours, unless you've got diabetes and it takes a bit longer. But essentially, to metabolise our sugars is very fast. So it's really great for, just a quick jog around the block, but it's not good for a marathon. So what sort of foods do you think are better for sustained energy levels? Protein, that's the best one, protein. And if you're going to have carbohydrates, complex carbohydrates, so whole grain, whole meal, because they are absorbed more slowly into your bloodstream. And they talk about low GI eating, which is basically eating foods that are going to give you sustained, slow release of energy. So they are going to keep your sugar levels more even instead of up, down, up, down, up, down, because you lose energy, but then you feel flat, and it can affect your mood very strongly. And I have definitely seen people talk to them about this because we couldn't find anything else. They went away and changed their eating pattern, and their anxiety was so much better. Imagine. So it's very important. And the other thing that's such a message is don't add stimulants when you are stressed. And what's the stimulant we all love to add? Caffeine, yes. Yes, I was saying this morning, I live in Balmain, which is one of those, trendy caffeine centres of the world. And patients come in and they're really, really stressed. And I say, how much coffee do you drink? Oh, three double shots. So that's 6 shots of coffee a day. Do you think that might be making you stressed? And they say, I don't know. Do you think it might be, doctor? I think it could. So caffeine is a stimulant. It helps to also put our blood pressure up and put our breathing up. And so minimise stimulants. And on the other hand, don't use alcohol as your relaxant, which is becoming increasingly common amongst women of my age group, actually, because it does work. It calms you down, but the next day and afterwards, it's a depressant. Alcohol is a downer, same as drugs like diazepam and Valium, if you know any of those drugs or have tried to take them. They're downers, so they're not good for people who are having issues with anxiety and depression. So number 4, sleep. Sometimes we have no control over our sleep patterns. We might have young children, we might be doing shift work, but often we do. Often we can choose to get more sleep. We can turn off the television and we can go to bed. We can stop reading Facebook mindlessly on our phone or Sudoku or whatever you're doing on your phone, and you can go to sleep. Sleep is an important downtime for all of our physical processes and our brain function. It can be very hard to slow our thinking and get to sleep. Get to sleep or stay asleep for some people. Lots of people sometimes take melatonin, sleeping medications, but all the evidence is that sustained change in our sleep patterns is a behavioural thing. And there'll be people out here that have had trouble with their sleep all their life, and there'll be people that say, no idea what you're talking about, I just lie down and that's it. But we are all different. But changing our sleep patterns can be done. And there are so many apps out there. If you go on the Beyond Blue website, there's a lot of information. There are sleep clinics you can get referred to. Really simple things like don't stimulate yourself before bed. Go to bed when you wake up in the middle of the night. If I'm awake more than about half an hour, I get up, I make a cup of tea, and then I read something very easy to read, not stressful. Or you might lie in bed and you might read the Bible. You might listen to some music, or there's a lot of relaxation apps out there. So there are some resources. Sleep is very, very, very important. And it's a vicious cycle. When people are anxious or depressed, you probably know their sleep cycle is disrupted. But on the other hand, disturbed sleep can cause anxiety and worsen depression. Time out, leisure time. That's very important. It's very, very important. We need to schedule it in. Time out is not a luxury. It's a survival strategy. It helps us to stay the course for the long term. And it's responsible, good stewardship of our time. And it's all about our attitude. It's not about, I'm just going to have an indulgent holiday overseas, because it's all about me. But I'm going to have a holiday so I can come back and be part of my church or continue to support people. So it's a survival strategy, and it's very important downtime to bring your stress levels down. So all of those extremely simple things it's worth having a look at in your life if you're experiencing a lot of stress. And if you're in a time of life where stress is very unrelenting, you need to make sure that you put them in place. Relaxation is very important, and I have just tell people quite often this very simple, extremely simple 2-minute relaxation technique, which I'm going to get you to do. I think I've got time. Okay, I want you all to close your eyes. Okay, I want you to focus on breathing in, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, in, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, in, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Keep breathing slowly, and I want you to start focusing on the top of your head, on your forehead and your eyebrows, and I want you to relax them. I want them to take away the furrows there and just relax your forehead and relax your eyebrows. And then relax your cheeks. Let them go all floppy. What about your chin on your neck? Let your neck go all soft and floppy. You might turn it from side to side. And then let your head flop down a little bit. Think about your shoulders. That's where women hold all of their stress. Roll your shoulders a few times and then relax them. Let them flop down. Shoulders back, flopped down. Move down your body and try to keep on breathing slowly in and out. And relax your stomach. Let your stomach go all floppy. You don't have to hold your stomach in anymore. Just relax your stomach. And then sit your sit bones right down into the chair. Relax your buttocks and your hips. And put your feet flat on the floor and try and just relax the muscles in your upper thigh. And then relax the muscles in your lower leg. And then see if you can relax your feet. Give them a bit of a wiggle, your toes. And then relax your big toe. And then your second toe. And your third toe. And your fourth toe. And your fifth toe. Just breathe in. And breathe out. Breathe in. And breathe out. Okay, so that's just a 2-minute relaxation. That's something you could do if you're at work and it's a really toxic place. People have started complaining about each other or slandering each other, or the boss is in your face. You can just go to the toilet and sit on the toilet and do that 2-minute relaxation. You can sit at your desk and do it. You can put your headphones on. No one knows whether you're working or not. Just relax. You can do it when the kids are there. Just get them to play with something and just try and do it slowly. It's a bit harder, I know, acknowledge that. But if you do that, I say this sometimes to people, if they're really, really stressed in, say, a work situation, try and do it 4 or 5 times a day. Try and do it every hour. And you're just bringing your adrenaline down each time so that you've got a bit more. Good thing to do, just relaxing regularly. You might think of a Bible verse. You might sing a song to yourself or listen to some music, but regular relaxation is important. I've been forgetting to change my slides, I realised. Sorry about that. So change your thinking. So as I said before, some people are more susceptible to the effects of stress because they've learnt long-standing, self-defeating patterns of thinking, often from our families. We are genetically different and we inherit a lot of that from our parents as well. Now, this is not blame our parents' time, but all families cope with stress and pressure in different ways, don't they? When our son-in-laws first came to our family home, they were so shocked at how much everybody yelled at each other at the table. They thought we were all having these huge fights, and we just have one of those very vocal families where everyone expresses an opinion. They just thought it was dreadful. They come from a very different, but I know one of them comes from a family where there's lots of an undercurrent of underexpressed, anger, and so it's not out in the open. I've got 4 children, so my husband is Mr. Chill, so he's very cool, he's a surfer, he's got a very thick skin, he doesn't care what anyone thinks about him, very laid back. I am, Mrs. Please everybody, work hard at school, get, high achiever, juggling lots of balls. That's me. I've got 4 children, 2 of them are stress heads, 2 of them are very relaxed. Although, interestingly, the last one is starting to get a bit of anxiety as he gets older. But I remember really strongly a conversation that we had in the car once when my kids were teenagers, and I had 3 of them in the car, and we were talking, the third one, who I've just visited down at the Rock there, he was talking about how every time he goes to a party or goes out with friends, he feels really sick in the stomach, and that is stress, isn't it? Sick in the stomach. And the other daughter was saying how, when she, uni exams, she's almost throwing up, she's really, really anxious, she's up all night, cramming, she's really stressed. And I was talking about how when my parents were divorced and I was a teenager, we went on access visits with my dad, I used to spend the whole time in the bathroom vomiting. I was really, really stressed. And then my oldest daughter said, "Is that what it feels like to be anxious?" Because she had no idea. She's never felt anxious a minute in her life. And she is an international corporate conference manager. She runs, huge conferences, and she's the one with the twins, and now another one. She's my husband, very, very chilled. So we have our genetics and we have our family background. But sometimes these patterns of thinking are just not helpful for stress. So examples of the types of thinking that might not be helpful. Catastrophising. Everything always turns out bad for me. I know it's going to be a disaster. Does anyone ever catastrophise? Yep. Overgeneralising. It always happens. I know, no one's going to speak to me. Black and white thinking. There's only this answer or this answer. Nothing in between. Mind reading. I've walked into a room full of people. I can tell they're all looking at me and they think I look daggy or I'm dressed badly or they think I'm stupid. And all of them, they're all just thinking, oh, I feel like I'm dressed badly too. They don't care what you look like. But some people are constantly mind reading everybody else around them and putting their own opinions of themselves onto everybody else. And it's hard to break that, isn't it? Some playing the victim is another type of self-defeating thought where, it's, woe is me, I'm the one cleaning the house and no one ever helps me, and because I don't put anything in place to get anyone to help me, but I'm always going to complain about it and feel bad about it. That's playing the victim. So sometimes we need to change our thinking, and it can be hard. So let me give you an example. A friend who had arranged to come over and help you with something really important has left a message cancelling at the last minute. So a self-defeating response might be, oh, she always lets me down, she hates me. What sort of constructive thinking might be? Oh, poor thing, maybe she's upset, maybe she's struggling. Maybe I need to help her or think about how I can help her. So it's not about me, it's about helping her. So can you see the difference? And some of you will go immediately to one or the other. We're very entrenched, it's very hard to break it. We can recognise them sometimes, but it's hard to break them. And that's where sometimes talking to a counsellor or a psychologist can be helpful. Their job is often to help you think about why you have learnt those thought patterns and to show you how you can change them. So most psychologists and counsellors, not so much about analysing your past and all that sort of stuff, it's about giving you tools to try and change your thinking. Because as I said, your worldview, the way you think about things really affects how you handle stress and anxiety and how prone you are to succumbing to it. So through COVID, I think many of us are familiar now with the funding through Medicare that will enable you to go and see a psychologist. You go to your GP, you get a mental health care plan. It contributes a lot towards the cost. But also lots of churches have a counselling service, so your denomination has probably got a counselling service if you're someone on low income, or if the stress that you're experiencing is as a result of some conflict within your church or something, you're probably going to be entitled to some counselling through your church. So ask about that. And also many GPs are skilled in managing mental health problems and will often say that on their bio on their website. So going to your GP is a good place to start if you're having trouble with anxiety or with sleep. So that's a good thing to do. So the next thing I'm going to talk to you about is a little bit further along than just identifying different thought patterns. It's actually the idea of structured problem solving. Now this is kind of what you would do with a lot of psychologists. It's a thing called cognitive behavioural therapy, or CBT. Someone called Sarah Edelman came up with that term. She's got a great book called Change Your Thinking. Psychologists will use all sorts of different techniques now, of course, but the basic one that often they use is cognitive behavioural therapy. So I'm going to take you very simply through that, and the outline of it is there on page 17. Okay, the first thing is identify the problem causing you stress. Now you can do this because you've all done your stress diaries, haven't you? So you know what's making you feel stressed. So it may be that you hate your job, or it may be that you hate the committee that you're on, or you don't like, I don't know, the group that you're in at church. Someone just triggers you and you just argue with them all the time. Or what other sorts of things could it be? Well, let's go with you hate your job. So secondly, okay, you've identified this is the thing that's making me feel like my heart's racing all the time, and every time I wake up in the morning I feel sick, because I've noticed when I don't go to work, I actually don't feel like that in the morning. Or when I'm on holidays, I don't feel like that. So I'm thinking, this must be something to think through. So maybe it's your job that's doing it. Okay, let's think about the options for dealing with this problem. What do you think we could do about the fact that we hate our jobs and it's making us stressed? Find another one? Yeah, we could quit. Yep. Train yourself. Good, you're going straight to the last one. Well done. So sometimes you feel like that in a job situation because you feel like you don't know what you're doing. You feel inadequate. So it may be that you need to upskill. And so you might need to go to the boss and say, I've identified that, I can serve the company better if I'm upskilled in such and such and such and such. Can you send me to a course to do that? Something like that. Yes, so you could upskill. What else could you do? What else could you do if you were very unhappy in a particular committee or something? Or any other ideas? Yeah? Yes, address the problem. So if it's, so you may be able to do that. So you may be able to go to your boss and say, there's a particularly difficult person or a difficult situation. Can we have mediation? Can we work this through? Yes, that's a possibility. Good-o. Somebody else this morning was saying, move to another department, move somewhere else. Go to your boss and say, I'm feeling I've served the company in this particular area for a long period of time, and so, but I think I would really be able to serve the company better in this area because that's, fits my skill set better, and I know I don't like working with that other person, but you don't have to say that. Okay, so your options might be those sorts of things. Okay, then you might write down the advantages and disadvantages of each option. So the advantage of quitting your job might be no stress. Stress is over. What could be the disadvantage? No money. That's right. And more stress. What could be... So the advantages of upskilling could be that, you learn another skill, you're more presentable for another job in the future, but the disadvantage could be it takes money and it takes time. Or it's a bit threatening, it's taking you out of your comfort zone. So you get the idea? So you might look through and see, okay, what are the advantages and disadvantages? And then you say, okay, well, I'm going to decide the best option for me is I'm going to upskill. So I'm going to go to the boss and I'm going to say, I really want to learn how to do this, that or the other, and so I'm going to upskill. And so the boss says, great, we've been looking for someone to do that, to upskill in that particular job. I'll send you off for that course straight away and I'll give you extra leave as well. It could be really great. So that's great. So you've solved that problem. And then hopefully your stress will be down, because the next thing you've got to do is you've got to review your progress. That's really important. So when I've got patients, it's amazing how often I've seen patients come to me and they're so stressed about something, and you talk through something very basically like this, and then they go away and you say, I want you to come back in 2 weeks' time because we see how you're going, do we need medication, whatever. They never come back. And then you see them 6 months down the track when they come in for their pap smear and you say, whatever happened about all that stress? Oh, once I talked to you and sorted it all out in my head, it was fine, it all went away. So sometimes identifying the stressor and having a plan, being listened to, talking to someone, thinking it through, can make all the difference. But it is good to review it. Okay, so I said at the beginning that a big part of stress management is changing your perspective and your thinking. So as Christians, of course, we're better placed than anybody to have a different perspective on life. We know that this life is not all there is. We're part of an eternal kingdom, and we should see a bigger picture. The things that often stress us are maybe not the most important things, but we need to really think that through sometimes, don't we? And even if they are, whatever is happening in our lives, we know the God who is in control of all things, and we trust him, and we know that he wants only the best for us, don't we? And he is refining us to be more like Jesus, even if that seems painful at the time. So if we remember that, if we think on that truth, we should have a completely different perspective to our stressful situation, shouldn't we? We need to really be people who take that advantage. That's our kryptonite, our trust in God, knowing the God who's in control of all things. I think something like this is a good idea, a monthly de-stress regime. Pick a day of the month or a day off or something like that, and have a think about what is making you feel stressed. What's causing you to feel stressed? What have you noticed that's made you stressed? Thinking about the things in your life. Can I reduce the stress in my life? Can I change my priorities a little bit? Have I got enough recovery time in my life? Have I got enough downtime? Am I spending time with God? Am I exercising? Am I eating properly? Am I getting enough sleep? Do I need to change my thinking? Am I seriously overthinking things? Am I being catastrophic? Do I need to go and actually talk to someone about that? Do I need to change my perspective? And importantly, have I got my eyes on God? Am I remembering what are the big things? What are the important things? And what is the big picture in all of this? Am I seeing my circumstances in the light of eternity? When I was a teenager, as I said before, my parents split up. It was a very nasty time, really. Lots of bad things happened, but I became a Christian out of it, actually, in my bedroom one night when I was full of great turbulence, because I recognised that I needed someone to change me, to change my heart. I couldn't do it myself, and so I asked God to change me as a 16-year-old. And this verse was really, really important to me as a young person in those years. It's Philippians chapter 4, verse 4-7. Rejoice in the Lord always. I say it again, rejoice. Let your gentleness be evident to all. The Lord is near. Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. So cling on to that, because that's your kryptonite. How about I pray? Dearest Father, thank you that you are the Lord of all. Thank you that you know us, you have saved each one of us. What an incredible blessing that you have chosen us from the beginning of time, that you've presented your word to us, and that your Holy Spirit has helped us to believe and to trust in you. Father, you know the things that we all struggle with. You know the things going on in our lives. Some of them are huge and unrelenting. Some of them may be small, but they're big to us. Father, help us to be wise about how we care for ourselves and our families. Help us to be wise about how we spend our time, and help us to keep our eyes on you. Help us to change our perspective, to have the big picture, to see things in the light of eternity. And Father, we pray that in that we might be able to point people to you as the faithful Lord who gives us all that we need, and that you might have all the glory. In Jesus' name, amen. Thanks, guys.